The blue blur returns to the screen in his third movie, but is this a shadow of the past or a shadow of what's to come? So I just watched Sonic 3 the movie in theaters, and boy do I have a story to tell you. But before we dive into the overall tale, it is important to discuss the original canon which we will use to compare against the new film. So let's start there. Sonic the Hedgehog is a blue hedgehog created by Yuji Naka and Naoto Oshima, and has grown in such popularity that Sonic has become the mascot and face of Sega in general. Since his first game release in 1991, Sonic has appeared in over 140 video game titles, over 7 TV shows, and over 3 films, including this animated gem right here. With Sonic's third live-action film in motion, how does it fare to the canon of the franchise as a whole? We first have to look at the original tale by which Sonic 3 is based off of. Sonic 3 is derived from the video game Sonic Adventure 2, which released in 2001 for Sega's last game console, the Sega Dreamcast, before it strictly became a video game developer. This game had 6 playable characters with 2 main story arcs to choose from, where on one side we have 3 heroes and on the other side we have 3 villains. The story starts on the hero's side with Sonic escaping arrest from a group called the Guardian Units of Nations, or GUN for short. Sonic has been mistaken for another hedgehog who escaped prison, whom he meets and discovers Shadow the Hedgehog. After being bested by this new threat, GUN captures Sonic and the homie is making headlines. With Sonic behind bars, you know his best friend Tails is ready to bust him out of prison. He turned his plane into a battle mech, breaks into prison, and starts throwing hands. That's how you know he's your best friend. Guy code. Meanwhile, all of this was a distraction so that Sonic's girlfriend/stalker, Amy Rose, can set Sonic free from prison. I know Sonic isn't into Amy like that, but bro, she's down for the cause if you know what I mean. Sonic breaks out of prison, encounters Shadow once again, and the two fight it out. As the two of these hedgehogs have their stare down, Sonic hears Eggman on Shadow's radio tell him to hurry up before the island blows up. Now, it's a race against time, and the heroes and the villains make it out safely. Then, the unthinkable happens. Eggman appears and does a live stream from the Space Colony Ark and unwields his grandfather's top secret weapon called the Eclipse Cannon. He then does the craziest shit you would ever see in a kid's show, besides Dragon Ball Z. Eggman test fires the Eclipse Cannon as a warning and aims it at the moon, destroying half of it. Just look at Amy's face! She knows shit is about to go down, so in order to put a stop to Eggman, the team of Sonic, Tails, and Amy reunite with Knuckles, and they break into Eggman's base and board his rocket to the Space Colony Ark to throw hands. Knuckles is off finding the missing pieces of the Master Emerald that he broke in order to prevent a new foe from stealing it, aka the baddie herself, Rouge the Bat. I'll stop. The rest of the gang ends up facing Dr. Eggman and Shadow. What happens next is shocking. I don't know if Eggman finally found his balls, but he traps Sonic in a pod, shoots him out into outer space, and then detonates the entire thing. Everybody thinks Sonic is now dead. Amy's crying, and Tails got his game face on to avenge his friend. So he starts shooting up the place to fight Eggman in his mech like a gang fight at McDonald's. However, we see that Sonic, before the pod blows up, has in his possession a fake Chaos Emerald designed by Tails to malfunction the Eclipse Cannon. Sonic recalls how Shadow used Chaos Control to warp time and space to teleport around, which was how he got his ass handed to him, and he now wonders if he can do the same thing too, but with the fake Emerald. Sure enough, it worked. Sonic is alive, y'all, and he's about to head to the Eclipse Cannon to shut that motherfucker down. On the way there, he encounters Shadows who's looking at him like he's a proud father looking at his son's first A in spelling. Learning that Sonic used Chaos Control with a fake emerald, the two Hedgehogs have a final match with Sonic as the victor.
But is the world now safe? But in order to determine that, we have to look at
the tale from the villain's perspective. As the saying goes, a villain is the hero in his own story, and this one exemplifies just that. Eggman found information on one of his late grandfather's experiments called Project Shadow. So like the good doctor always does, he gets in his mech, breaks into a secured prison compound, and starts shooting up everything. Like some John Wick shit. The man destroys guns machines like it's nothing, and awakens Project Shadow, and to his shock, it's another Hedgehog, Shadow the Hedgehog. With a striking resemblance to Sonic, the Doctor is scared at first, but after seeing Shadow destroy a giant gun mech, the two form an alliance.
Amidst the news of Shadow's jailbreak, Gun captures the wrong Hedgehog,
Sonic the Hedgehog, and in an attempt to escape his pursuers, he faces Shadow, who is much stronger than him, because he is using the Chaos Emerald to warp. Shadow escapes and Sonic is captured once again. On board the Space Colony Ark, Eggman learns of his grandfather, Professor Gerald Robotnik, and his research on the development of the Eclipse Cannon, which only needs the power of all 7 Chaos Emeralds to function, and they currently have 1. Eventually, Eggman and Shadow make plans to take another Chaos Emerald and destroy Gun's prison compound that's holding it. And that's where Rouge the Bat appears, aka Rouge the Baddie. I'll stop. She recently tried to steal Knuckles' Master Emerald, but Knuckles shattered it to protect it from being stolen. Both are after the Master Emerald pieces, and Rouge is now after the Chaos Emeralds to assist the Mad Doctor, Eggman, in his plot of world conquest.
The plan goes underway, and it's a success.
But Rouge accidentally gets locked into a prison cell with a Chaos Emerald on an island that is set to explode.
And there's only one person that can save her. That's right, you've guessed it.
His name is Mighty the Armadillo. Shadow the Hedgehog. They make it back to the Space Colony Ark, and Eggman does a Twitch stream across all media platforms and fires the Eclipse Cannon at the moon, blowing it in half. Amy is in utter shock, and the world is literally praying to God for help. With only one more emerald left, the villains find themselves faced with the heroes on board the Space Colony Ark. Eggman ends up trapping Sonic in a pod and shoots his ass into space and blows up the pod with Sonic on it. And Amy is crying.
It's like Eggman keeps getting dubs in this game. Like I can hear his thoughts right now. You mean to tell me that the solution to my problem with this blue hedgehog was another hedgehog?
But Tails won't have it, and he fights Eggman, shooting up the place like some Pulp Fiction kind of shit. Rouge just gets back from being saved by Knuckles, who manages to rescue her from falling into a fiery furnace. Knuckles restores the Master Emerald, and Rouge seems to have a crush on Knuckles. You lucky son of a bitch. I'll stop. Rouge unites with Shadow, who notices that someone is approaching the Eclipse Cannon. Rouge then reveals that she is not just a treasure hunter, but a government spy who obtained intel on Project Shadow, and shows a picture of what looks like the true Project Shadow, and she is unsure of what this Shadow actually is. Frightening. Despite this, Shadow races off to find Sonic still alive, all because he used the fake emerald to do chaos control. Shadow's actually impressed, and the two of them fight, where the victor will either save the world or obliterate it. From our perspective, it looks like Shadow won, and Eggman places the last Chaos Emerald into the Eclipse Cannon. Then we get warnings on all the computer monitors. The events of the last story is by far the most epic. 50 years ago on the Space Colony Ark, these words are the most important in order to understand the history of what's about to happen next. But to do this, I'm going to borrow intel from 2 games. The first being Shadow the Hedgehog, and the other being Sonic X Shadow Generations, or more specifically, Shadow Generations. Professor Gerald Robotnik was a benevolent scientist who served on board the space colony Ark. With him was his granddaughter Maria Robotnik, Eggman's cousin. Shocking. Like there's no family resemblance whatsoever between the two of them. Maria was ill, so Professor Gerald began experiments on chaos control to save his granddaughter. This was what led to the creation of the prototype of the ultimate life form called the Biolizard. Although a failed experiment, the Biolizard survived, which is very important in this tale. With no other solutions in developing the ultimate life form, an alien by the name of Black Doom offered to assist Professor Gerald on some Palpatine shit and gives Professor Gerald a sample of his blood. With this, Professor Gerald created Shadow and managed to save Maria's life. Why Professor Gerald ended up making a hedgehog is beyond me. But with this, Professor Gerald created Shadow and managed to save Maria's life. However, there was a catch. Promise time. Shadow, who was named by Maria, must assist Black Doom and his army in the conquest of Earth. Professor Gerald agreed, but began to work behind the scenes on the creation of a weapon strong enough to destroy Black Doom and his army on board what is called the Black Comet. This weapon was called the Eclipse Cannon. However, Gunn caught a glimpse of Professor Gerald's plans and invaded the space colony Ark, arrested Professor Gerald, and sought the capture of Project Shadow. Maria attempted to save Shadow by getting him into an escape pod to Earth. And the last thing Shadow heard was Maria's promise, but that promise became muddled because of gunfire. A gun soldier shoots Maria from behind, killing her right before Shadow's eyes as he was about to be shot out into space towards Earth. Damn, what a story. Gunn captured Shadow on Earth, and upon Shadow's awakening, his primary motivation was avenging the death of Maria.
But as we would soon find out, that's not the only person who shared that motivation.
Now, in the present, warning alerts are being blasted across the space colony Ark, with a video message from the late Professor Gerald Robotnik, being his last journal entry on the instrument of his revenge for the loss of his granddaughter, which was the cause of his insanity. The solution was Project Shadow. However, Tails' plan to stop the Eclipse Cannon had backfired due to Professor Gerald's program. So everybody but Shadow teamed up to put a stop to the Eclipse Cannon. While everyone was doing their part in the bowels of the space colony Ark,
I actually remember this long-ass stage.
Amy went to Shadow to beg for his help. That's when Shadow fully remembered Maria's last words, her wish for Shadow to protect the people of Earth. Now, Shadow was ready to be the hero he was always intended to become. Sonic and Knuckles arrived to the core of the Eclipse Cannon to use the Master Emerald to stop the Chaos Emeralds. But they begin to hear the words of Professor Gerald play, and then the prototype emerges. The Biolizard in full maturity, who harbors the wish of Professor Gerald to eliminate all life on Earth as revenge for Maria. That's when Shadow appears to fight the Biolizard. Shadow wins, and Knuckles uses the Master Emerald to stop the Chaos Emeralds. However, things weren't going to be that easy. The Biolizard uses chaos control to warp outside the space colony Ark and hurl the station to the Earth to kill a hell of a lot of people.
Our only hope now rests on Sonic and Shadow. Or should I say,
Super Sonic and Super Shadow. This final battle is the most memorable battle ever. The two Super Hedgehogs. And some badass music. Just listen. Okay, that's enough. They beat Biolizard for good and used chaos control to stop the space colony Ark from crashing to the Earth. However, Shadow used up all his power and could no longer maintain his super state. Shadow falls to the Earth presumed to be dead, and the heroes along with Rouge and Eggman mourn his death, especially Sonic. That's our story.
So now how does this story fare against the new movie?
This movie is like the Muppets Christmas Carol merged with the live-action Grinch That Stole Christmas, with a hint of Star Wars. Help me, Obi-Wan Kenobi. Who else remembers the first draft we almost got of Sonic from the first movie? We came a long way, and it's thanks to the fans that we got this corrected. Sort of. But did we overshoot our expectations with this third film? Was that ugly ass hedgehog a sign of what was to come all along? Was this ugly ass motherfucker a clue as to what Hollywood intended to do with our beloved hero? The movie had great graphics, costumes, set design, and camera angles. However, none of their set designs matched anything from the original game, except for Professor Gerald's prison. But that was just about it. Even the Chow and the Chow Garden are different, because instead of the Chow being separate entities of their own right guarded by chaos, they are the equivalent to Teletubbies at a Chuck E. Cheese, aka the Chow Garden restaurant. The acting from the cast was very believable, and it draws you in. The addition of Keanu Reeves as Shadow the Hedgehog was a definite win, and his portrayal did not disappoint. This includes the casting of Ben Schwartz as Sonic, Colleen O'Shaughnessy as Tails, and Idris Elba as Knuckles. Upon observation, it appears that their portrayals of these characters come mostly from character portrayals of the TV show Sonic Boom instead of the game itself. A clue to this can be found in Knuckles, who instead of being a serious treasure hunter, is at times a ditzy carefree fighter, as seen in the Sonic Boom show. Commander Walters of Gun, portrayed by actor Thomas Butler, appears to be slightly off. Instead of being a tough and strong leader and fighter for Gun, he comes off as a feeble director / grandfather type figure to the main heroes, as we saw in the scene at the Chow Garden restaurant. Last, we have Dr. Eggman, played by comedian and actor Jim Carrey. It's clear his acting isn't solely based on the Eggman from Sonic Adventure 2 or even the first Sonic Adventure, but is closely resembling that of the Eggman seen in Sonic Boom. Sort of.
I'm trying here.
Jim also played the role of Professor Gerald Robotnik, who is still alive, I might add. However, this is where things take a twist.
Jim Carrey's portrayal of Professor Gerald Robotnik is nothing like the canon. They're like two sides of the same coin, Eggman and Gerald.
Eggman is a sinister evil doctor bent on global conquest and uses enhanced robotics and mechanical engineering to achieve his goals. Where in canon, he traps animals from Sonic's world in his machines to create what he calls badniks, which never happens in the first two movies. Shh! While Professor Gerald, although skilled in robotics, appears to have a primary focus on biological engineering, hence his creation of both the Bio-Lizard and Shadow, his creation of the Eclipse cannon shows how knowledgeable he was in mechanical engineering. Professor Gerald had no interest in global conquest, but a cure for Maria, and the will to save the world from the alien Black Doom and his army, which came to a drastic halt due to his arrest by Gunn for Project Shadow, which led to the untimely death of his granddaughter Maria. The loss of Maria was what made Professor Gerald go insane, and he was supposed to die in prison. In short, Professor Gerald of the film is more like Jim Carrey's portrayal of the Grinch That Stole Christmas, and this movie came out just around the holidays.
How ironic.
The portrayal of Maria Robotnik by Alila Brown was decent, but I felt that there should have been more done with the character to make her feel like more of the center of the entire story, since she is to carry the theme of this tale. In a way, I would say Maria is the most important character in the entire story. After all, it was Maria's last words that saved the world in the game. though those words were changed in the film.
The movie opens up with
Shadow asleep in a pod on Prison Island, which is a heavily guarded facility off the coast of Japan. Yes, Japan. Homie wakes up, throws hands, and then races across the ocean to the shoreline. Meanwhile, Sonic, Tails, and Knuckles appear to be on a camping trip and have a foot race. Sonic wins, but notices holograms of Tails and Knuckles already at the finish line. So, he races back to find that his friends and adopted parents, Tom and Maddie, are holding a surprise party for Sonic, celebrating his anniversary of his arrival on Earth.
Kicking ice cream aside, the festivities comes to a halt because Gun ends up showing up because they need help from
Sonic Sonic Team, to aid them in capturing an escaped alien in Japan. So the heroes board the helicopter, and to my shock, Gun uses a ring to teleport to Japan. Imagine how much money they just saved on gas. Sonic and his friends arrive in Japan, jump out the helicopter on some Mission Impossible type of shit, and land at Ground Zero in Japan. Everything looks like a mess. Vehicles are destroyed, buildings are a shamble, and it starts to feel like 28 months later. I mean 28 days later.
Then we see the star of the show,
Vegeta! If he was a furry. Shadow the Hedgehog. Sonic tries to communicate with him to find common ground, but Knuckles' dumbass wants to fight. So Shadow starts throwing hands, and it becomes very clear that the heroes are unmatched. Shadow escapes, embarrassing Sonic by handcuffing him to a pole without him knowing, and Tails comes up with the brightest idea to regroup and come up with a plan with Commander Walters of Gun at none other than Chuck E. Cheese, aka the Chow Garden. Brilliant, right?
The crazy thing is that Commander Walters actually shows up to a kid's restaurant in Japan to talk about top secret shit that the public aren't supposed to know about.
But all hell breaks loose when Eggman's robot orb shits shoot up the place. They are saved by an uninsured motorist on a motorcycle, and Commander Walters is down. The commander gives Sonic a top secret passkey and does not tell him what it's for, before passing out. The team leave, and for some reason Sonic and his friends do not trust Gun. So they track the motorcycle guy, and it's revealed to be Agent Stone, who reveals that Eggman is still alive. A giant crab robot base thing comes up out of the water, and there we see Eggman watching Spanish soap operas while eating away his sorrows, putting on an extra 20 to 50 pounds in the gut alone, looking like a fat Kid Rock.
I swear to God, I'm not making this up.
In short, Eggman learns that someone is using his machines, and they all form an alliance. Eggman is able to track the origin of whoever is using his machines, and instead of just going there as is, the dude decides to get a haircut, clean up, and get new clothes tailored for him by Agent Stone. If you think he's doing this while traveling in the crab machine, then you are wrong, because after he cleans up, sort of, they use a ring to warp to where the machines are being kept.
Imagine if we actually put more time into the story.
The new Avengers arrive to an abandoned building where Knuckles punches the door open. Deep inside this construct resides Shadow, who is having a flashback of his time with Maria. This was truly sad and one of the best things about this movie. However, Shadow is not alone. The new Avengers split up and get taken out by Shadow one by one on some horror movie Friday the 13th type of shit. All except Eggman. Eggman then meets the one who not only controls his machines, but released Shadow from Prison Island, and it's none other than Professor Gerald Robotnik, who is over 100 years old, who is also played by Jim Carrey.
Due to Jim Carrey's portrayal of Professor Gerald Robotnik in this movie, I'm just gonna call him
the Grinch. Now, Eggman is unaware that he had a grandfather, which is the dumbest shit I've ever heard. So to prove they are related, Eggman tests the Grinch's intelligence with a series of questions, which proves the blood relation in Eggman's mind. They team up with Shadow, release Agent Stone, take the passkey from Sonic, who is tied to a pole with his friends, and they make plans to uncover a top secret weapon developed by the Grinch in exchange for his release from prison. Like that makes any sense. And to do this, they need the second passkey kept in a top secret location inside of Gun headquarters in London.
So if these passkeys were that important, then why would
Commander Walters have it with him, which appears to be at all times, and go to the Chow Garden Kitty restaurant to talk about top secret shit in front of civilians of a foreign country? Now I have your attention. Before Team Dark leaves, Shadow throws a device and it generates a black hole. Team Sonic escapes through one of Tails' rings, and they later warp to Tom and Maddie for help, who have nothing better to do except earn that paycheck.
So Sonic Team go to Tom and Maddie for help and not Gun, especially after receiving updated information about the situation.
Got it. Sonic Heroes then comes up with a plan to break into Gun HQ in London, while Eggman and the Grinch have family bonding moments riding roller coasters, playing video games through VR, and actually reenacting Christmas with the Grinch dressed up as Santa Claus.
I swear to God, I am not making any of this up.
Imagine if they actually focused on the story. Anyway, Team Dark arrives to London and they make plans to break into HQ as well. The rest of this movie focuses on cameos of Boris Kojo and the other black woman from the sequel. How? Tom and Maddie use a cloaking device to disguise as Maddie's in-laws, i.e. Maddie becoming her sister and Tom becoming his brother-in-law. Mind you, it was Maddie's brother-in-law who was a Gun agent from the second film, not his wife. So Tom and Maddie walk into Gun, and Maddie manages to black her way through security protocols, which makes no sense.
Here's an example of what I mean when I say black her way through.
Oh God! Listen, I'm not trying
Are you okay?
up. That's y'all good.
Are you okay?
Hold on. Listen,
No,
wait a
not all
minute.
right.
I never seen someone cry with the tears not coming out, so I just want to make sure you're okay.
Because it's an inner cry, my heart is crying.
Are you dehydrated?
This works, but they find Eggman's flash drive already in one of the security terminals. I mean, it has his face on it and everything. Then we see Jim Carrey play with himself. By that I mean that Eggman and the Grinch, who are wearing laser protected clothing by Eggman's design, dance and tango and waltz through the deadly laser room that is guarding the second passkey, all the while being protected by their articles of clothing.
I swear to God, I am not making any of this up.
They make it to the other side but are pushed down by gravity because it's a gravity room trap thingy. Sonic manages to break through HQ with Tails' help and enters the gravity room, only to be hovering above ground. Then walks in actress Kristen Ritter, who is controlling the gravity in the room, ironically. And gun soldiers bring in Tom, Maddie, and Tails. That's when Sonic brings out Plan B. Knuckles rushes into the room, ends up breaking the controls, and everything goes wonky. Sonic saves his family and friends from falling debris, and Kristen Ritter now has the second passkey. That's when Tom decides to camouflage himself as Commander Walters. He then confronts Kristen Ritter and have her give him the passkey. Mission cleared. However, after she leaves, Shadow teleports into the building, sees Tom as Commander Walters, starts to have PTSD from the time of Maria's death involving Walters, and then punches Tom so hard in the gut that it would make Vegeta jealous.
Tom is now out cold on the ground and he reverts back to his original self, and Shadow sees this and he's like,
Whoops, wrong Sonic shows up, sees that Tom is hurt or dead, and looks at Shadow with such anger before he teleports out with the final passkey. Team Dark reunites, and to our shock, they unearth the Eclipse Cannon device the Grinch made in exchange for his prison release, and it's on the very river next to Gun headquarters.
I swear to God, I am not making any of this up.
The Eclipse Cannon station ascends to outer space with Team Dark on board. and Tom is taken to the hospital. Sonic Team has an argument because Sonic wants the Master Emerald to go super. Knuckles finally concedes and tells Sonic who the guardian of the Master Emerald is, and it's some dude on a roof in hockey gear using the Master Emerald as a hockey puck, shooting goals with it.
I swear to God, I'm not making this up.
Sonic warps to the roof, takes the Master Emerald from the dumbass by force, gets the Chaos Emeralds inside, which makes no sense, goes supersonic, and then travels to outer space. In the space station, Shadow gets reminded by the Grinch of their purpose, causing Shadow to remember Maria's death. He then uses Boost to power the Eclipse Cannon. Supersonic shows up to fight Shadow, taking him to Earth where they fight across the globe. Eggman realizes that the Grinch wanted to destroy all life on the planet, including themselves because of Maria, which causes Eggman to realize that Agent Stone was right in his warnings of Shadow the entire time earlier in the film. And he is currently on Earth. So now we have Jim Carrey versus James Carrey on the space station. Back on Earth, Shadow and Supersonic are fighting, and somehow Shadow manages to push Sonic so hard that he separates him from the Chaos Emeralds.
Now we have to hit pause.
You mean to tell me that Shadow in base form is so strong that he was able to, with a single strike, knock Sonic out of his super form, thus separating him from the Chaos Emeralds? If this script was handed to Dragon Ball Z, Vegeta would have an orgasm. But the two hedgehogs collide into the 7 emeralds between them, and they both go super. It's now Super Sonic versus Super Shadow across the world, from Egypt to Japan to New York to Scotland to Rome and to Kazakhstan and to the moon. Super Sonic has Shadow now in base form on the moon, getting ready to deliver the final blow, and Shadow welcomes it. But Sonic remembers the words from Tom, his guardian angel, to trust his heart and be careful what he turns into. And Super Sonic does not deliver the final blow, and Shadow wants to know why. And while they are talking on the moon, I am wondering, why are they able to breathe in space? Don't say that it's because they're aliens, because that's bullshit. Don't say that it's because of the Chaos Emeralds either, because none of them are in their super form right now. Sonic's words reaches Shadow, and Shadow recalls Maria's words of how even when a star dies, the light it gives off can still be seen.
Why does this remind me of A Kiss from a Rose by Seal?
Da 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 da. Then the two hedgehogs team up and go super to stop the Eclipse Cannon. Da 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 da. I've been kissed by a rose on the grave. There used to be. I'll stop. Seriously though, they are doing this, and chopped up pieces of the song Live and Learn, performed by Crush 40 for the Sonic Adventure 2 game, plays in the background. Briefly. They are fighting machines coming from the space station, and Shadow is using Doom Spears to destroy them, which he never used in Sonic Adventure 2 until recently in Shadow Generations. On the station, the Grinch tries to throw Eggman to the vacuum of space after their Rock'em Sock'em robot fight, and Eggman is saved by Tails and Knuckles, who came through one of the golden ring shits. With one of Sonic's quills that is glowing yellow that Eggman got from Sonic from earlier in the movie, he sticks the Grinch in the ass on some 1000 years of death shit from Naruto, and the Grinch is hurled into the energy vortex and dies.
I swear to God, you know the rest.
But the Grinch had one of Shadow's quills on him too, so why didn't he realize that Shadow's quill went super as well? The Eclipse Cannon fires, and Super Sonic and Super Shadow block the energy the best they could, which actually makes no sense, since they should be stronger than the energy of the beam, since it's not powered by the emeralds, but Shadow's energy from running in base form using Boost, aka by holding down the right trigger. Eggman, Tails, and Knuckles manage to deflect the beam away from the planet, but it hits the moon. Sonic loses his super form and falls to the earth, and Tails holds his breath and has Knuckles hurl him to Sonic to use a ring to warp to safety. You see, I told you they can't breathe in space. Knuckles sees that Tails is unconscious, so he goes to aid them and they warp safely back to Earth. Eggman does a live Twitch stream that can also be seen on YouTube and gives a final message to Agent Stone, while Super Shadow pushes the space station away from the planet, so that when it explodes, the energy does not harm the planet, and kaboom! Shadow and Eggman are presumed to be dead. Now, Sonic team with Tom and Maddie and their little dog 2 are camping and having another foot race. Roll credits. Sort of. Post credits, Sonic wins his race and it looks like he is in New York. And to our shock, he is met by Metal Sonic. Even more shocking, there are more than one! And his savior is none other than the hammer-wielding Amy Rose, which raises more questions than answers.
So does this movie even have heart? Is there some type of emotional story that can connect everything together?
Well, yes, and it's a brief one, and not a strong one. The emotional story centers on how Sonic, who used to be on his own, has to learn to trust his teammates and become an actual team together. But this makes no sense though, because since his arrival on Earth in the first movie, he worked alongside Tom and Maddie, and Tails in the sequel just fine. So this just seems like a rushed underlying story arc for kids. Sonic 3, with all its ups and downs, is a good movie that lacked the flair of the original storyline from the game. It felt rushed with a lot of silly contrived elements, with weakened and misused character motivations. The notion of "it's for kids" is no excuse for the quality of storytelling it delivered. We cannot substitute graphics and iconic characters from well-known intellectual properties for bad storytelling, especially if it's hinging on A-list actors. If we were to honor the characters and the story they represent, then this should have been a two-part film in my opinion, with the second part to be released in the spring or summer, so that we can focus more on the story instead of these moments that either make no sense for the plot or that takes away the inherent value of the characters themselves. Due to this, I have to give this movie 1.5 stars. Fundamentally, the story did not deliver. The film, however, was technologically sound with graphics, which I believe was the primary focus of the people behind the scenes. The acting was okay, though certain actors did not represent the characters in a proper light, or they were just too over the top, too bland, or unneeded altogether. Paycheck.
You know, I came back to this universe because, first of all, I get to play a genius, which is a bit of a stretch. You know, it's just, I bought a lot of stuff and I need the money, frankly.
To note, even though we did not hear Amy Rose speak, just based on her entrance and appearance, it looks like she is going for a more feminist approach, centered on her character depictions in Sonic Boom. How is it that a cartoon TV series like Sonic X represented the story far better than the live-action movie, even with an introduction to new characters like Chris, who is the Tom of the series? The action story needed a lot of work, and the emotional story was too weak for me to care. If I were to rework the story, it would not only have to be a two-part film with more serious elements, but I would focus on these following things. Rouge the Bat's inclusion into the story. An introduction to the Bio-Lizard, including the Bio-Lizard. Professor Gerald Robotnik remains dead and dies in prison 50 years ago. Use Maria's actual last words and events leading to her death. Include the actual space colony arc. Remove Tom and Maddie from the equation or use them only for the beginning of Act 1. Include Amy Rose as a fangirl who is in love with Sonic from another world who, like Tails, comes to Earth to meet him, which would give her motivation to help Tails break Sonic out of prison due to mistaken identity because of Shadow. Bring Angel Island to Earth, which would be an important Easter egg. Show the child being real creatures on Angel Island, and have them tied to the Echidna conflict like with Longclaw from the first movie as an Easter egg. Include 3 to 5 Big the Cat cameos in the background to allude to the existence of chaos since the shattering of the Master Emerald from the second film. He's looking for Froggy. Use that as an Easter egg. Show Doom's Eye in one flashback of Shadow's creation and 2 times throughout the present timeline. Have a post-credit scene of Eggman going to his lab with Sonic's quill that he received earlier in the movie, and have him use it for Project Metal for the creation of Metal Sonic, which would be inspired by Professor Gerald's use of Project Shadow. These are just some of the key elements I would change to move the story in the right direction. But hey, Sega and Paramount Pictures have to get the bill. No movie is perfect, but proper characterizations are a must, not just for the industry, but the fan base. You want proof? Well, this video will explain exactly what I mean.